And writing and language, bada bing, bada boom. If you have the massive blue book, we're still in SAT Practice Test 8. We're on page 572. The passage that we're looking at is called "Don't Waste This Waste." Now, these passages don't have a blurb, remember? So we're not getting a whole lot of information, but that's okay, because we're not generally being tested on comprehension. Writing and language is much more like you're on your way to turn something in English class, and your friend like pulls you aside and is just like, hey, I need you to proofread this. I need you to edit this. Make sure this makes sense. And so we're going to get questions that are like proofreader questions, right? They're going to be very straightforward rules of grammar and commas, like very clear right or wrong answers. Those are the proofreader questions. Then we're also going to get editor questions, questions that really just ask, you know, how does this best match the tone or the flow or the main idea of the passage? There's no grammatical mistakes here, but there are things that might not make sense in from a reading standpoint. Okay, so hopefully you are all at the start of SAT Practice Test 8. It's on the 20th page of the PDF, and it is on page 572 of the Big Blue Book. Now, if you recall our strategies, it's a lot different than the reading comp. We're just going to dive in. We're not going to do a helicopter view of the questions. We are going to answer them more or less in order. There'll be a couple exceptions, but usually we'll just kind of be able to plug and play as we go. So let's start reading. Over the past generation, people in many parts of the United States have become accustomed to dividing their household waste products into different categories for recycling. Regardless, paper may go in one container, glass and aluminum in another, regular garbage in a third. Okay, we're being asked about number one, regardless. And if we look at our options here, because that's the thing, we want to make sure that we know what we're being tested on. Maybe we'd be tested on the comma, but it looks like no, all these examples have commas. The only difference is the transition phrase being used. Now, I don't know if I've gone over this with you guys yet, and we can go over this in more detail at a later date. But there are essentially three types of transitions. Contrast, continue, and cause and effect. Or you could call them contrasters, continuers, and I don't know, cause and effectors, causers and effectors. Whatever works for you there. The contrasters mean that we're moving from one idea to a very different idea. So that's where we get our however. That's where we get the word, you know, but, nevertheless is another great one. Continuers are when we're just sort of, you know, moving the same idea along. A continuer might be as simple as and. It might be something more complicated like for example. Or in the same way. Or likewise. If you've taken high school Spanish, this is like that same word, igualmente. In the same way, in the same fashion. We're just continuing the idea that's come before. Cause and effect has a much more straightforward kind of relationship. It just means that what came before caused what's coming after, or vice versa. So that's where we get words like therefore, because, maybe since this happened, this also happened. So we want to make sure we know what ideas are on either side of the transition before we know which one to use. So here we have, over the past generation, people in many parts of the United States have become accustomed to dividing their household waste products into different categories for recycling. Okay, that's idea number one. Idea number two, regardless, paper may go in one container, glass and aluminum in another, regular garbage in a third. These two ideas seem very similar to me. I think we're actually just continuing, so we don't need a contraster like regardless. That cancels out A. However, that's another contraster. And if you have more than one of the same type of transition, those kind of cancel out. Furthermore, well, that would mean that we're adding on to what came before, but we're really just giving an example of what came before. So for that reason, I like D. All right, let's keep moving. Recently, some US cities have added a new category: compost, organic matter such as food scraps and yard debris. Like paper or glass recycling, composting demands a certain amount of effort from the public in order to be successful, but the inconveniences of composting are far outweighed by its benefits. Most people think of banana peels, eggshells, and dead leaves as waste, but compost is actually a valuable resource with multiple practical uses. When utilized as a garden fertilizer, compost provides nutrients to soil and improves plant growth while deterring or killing pests and preventing some plant diseases. It also enhances soil texture, encouraging healthy roots and minimizing or annihilating the need for chemical fertilizers. Well, what are we being tested on here? Which choice best maintains the style and tone of the passage? I don't know about you guys, but annihilating seems a little extreme. Remember, content is what a passage says, tone is how a passage feels. So annihilating might work if we were talking about pro wrestling or something, but we're just talking about compost here. We're annihilating the need for chemical fertilizers. Eliminating, yeah, you might be familiar with the phrase to eliminate a need. Ousting a need, that doesn't really work. That's a little too formal for us. Closing the door on, well, don't use more words if you can use fewer. So for that reason, I like B. Eliminate a need, that's just a common phrase. And it's not too common, it's not too informal, but it's also not, too fancy like the word ousting. This is why, by the way, we recommend that you read the whole passage for writing and language, not just the sentences that have questions in them, because you'll be asked about the style and tone of the passage overall. Better than soil at holding moisture, compost minimizes water waste and storm runoff, comma, it increases savings on watering costs, and helps reduce erosion on embankments near bodies of water. Okay, so it increases savings is the phrase we're being asked about. And we can replace it with any one of these word choices. Now, it's kind of just the same words being mixed up in different ways. So this could be a case of subject-verb agreement. So the subject we have here is compost. Now we're giving a list of 3. And in a list of 3 like this, right, minimizes waterways and storm runoff, increases savings, and helps reduce erosion. We want to follow that same pattern. And the big red flag for me here is that we're using the word it here in the second part of our list of 3, but not in the other part. Increases savings on watering costs and helps reduce erosion. We can just say compost minimizes water and storm runoff, comma, increases savings on watering cost and helps. We can just have subject and all of our verbs afterwards. We don't need to reintroduce the subject through a pronoun. So this is sort of a concision question. Why use more words when you can use fewer? And if you're ever unsure of which of these make the most sense, I would really recommend you just plug them in. Minimizes waterways and storm runoff, comma, savings increase on watering costs. Well, no, that doesn't match, right? There's just going to be some answers that sound right. Also, it increases savings. See, that's our clue that we're being tested on concision. Let's use the fewest and most correct words that we can. In large quantities, comma, which one would expect to see when it is collected for an entire municipality, right, parenthesis, comma, compost can be converted into a natural gas that can be used as fuel for transportation or heating and cooling systems. All right, so this is one of the asides that we're being tested on here. Some of them, you know, here we have a comma, here we have a left paren, here we have like a semicolon and a left parenthesis. The issue there is that when we have an aside, when we're sort of like inserting a phrase into our sentence, we could couch that in a couple of different ways. We can make an aside through parentheses. We can make an aside through like dashes, or we can make an aside through commas. Those look like lowercase g's, but you get it. Now, the issue here is that when we make this aside, and again, this is where we insert words that are like sort of relevant, but kind of distract from the main topic. We just want to make sure they know this. These two always have to match. You can't have a parenthesis on one side and a comma on the other. It has to be parenthesis with parenthesis, dash with dash, comma with comma. So if we take that matching strategy back here, the part we can't change has a right parenthesis. Well, that means that the left half, it has to have a left parenthesis of some kind. So I don't like A or C. And the other issue is this semicolon. Now, a semicolon, it's the same function as a period. It's sort of the period's pretentious cousin, right? So it doesn't couch that aside very well, and in large quantities is not a full sentence. So that leaves me with B. And again, this is taking me a while because I'm explaining it out loud. But once you guys like know that you know these rules, you're going to be zipping through these questions. Okay, yes, where were we? we finish that sentence. In spite of all compost potential uses, however, most of this so-called waste is wasted. According to the Environmental Protection Agency, or the EPA, over 13 million tons of metal ended up in US landfills in 2009, along with over 13 million tons of yard debris. Okay, well that's a little confusing, right? We were talking about compost, and now it's just like, also there's a lot of metal in our landfills. We seem distracted from the main point in one way or another. So the writer here wants to include information from the graph that is consistent with the description of compost in the passage. Which choice most effectively accomplishes this goal? Well, even without looking at the graph, our instinct is going to say food waste, right? But let's look at it just to know what it is we're talking about. Yeah. Food waste is right here. And is it 33 million tons? Actual amount of waste in millions of tons. Lo and behold, right there, right between 30 and 35. D is where we got to go. Remarkably, less glass was discarded in landfills that year than any other substance, including plastics or paper. The writer wants to support, yes, so we're being asked about this phrase, less glass, and its use in the passage overall. The writer wants to support the paragraph's main idea with accurate and relevant information from the graph. Which choice most effectively accomplishes this goal? Okay, so we're asking for the relationship between something, maybe it's glass, it's less or it's more than any other substance. So let's plug and play. Was more metal discarded in landfills than any other substance? No, metal's around the middle here. It looks like our leader is food waste. And lo and behold, we do have that answer. So that's not only relevant to the passage, it's also accurate. Even worse, than the squandering of this useful resource is the fact that compost in landfills cannot break down due to the lack of necessary air and moisture. Okay, so worse, than. If we look at our options here, it seems we're being tested on than versus then, and we're being tested on comma use as well. So even worse than the squandering. Well, I don't think we need a comma there. We can just say even worse than. And a way to remember, and we can go over like word choice and diction in more detail later on, but the difference between than and then, I'll just give you guys a quick tip there if you don't know this already. So than compares. If you would rather this than this, that's you want to use THAN. Then is about sequence or even about time, if you want to get more specific. THEN is when we get into first this, then this, then this. That's THEN. Than compares, then is about sequence. So what are we doing here? Well, it's pretty clear we're comparing the fact that compost and landfills can't break down and the squandering of this resource. So we want THAN and we want no comma, and only B provides both. Okay, yep, we read all of that. As a result, organic material that is sent to landfills contribute to the release of methane, a very potent greenhouse gas. So let's look at 8 first. Landfills contribute. Okay, so we're being asked not about different words, but about the different tenses of those words. And what I just said is a great example of how not to do subject-verb agreement. Because we always want to say things like, that's the way the cookie crumbles. We never want to be caught saying, that's the way the cookie crumble, or that's the way the cookie have crumbled. Those just don't make sense in English. So what's our subject here? Organic material contributes. It's not the landfills. That might confuse you because it's right next to the verb. It's not landfills contribute. It's organic material contributes. And then number 9, we're talking about methane as a very potent greenhouse gas. So here we're being asked about word choice. Potent just means very strong. You might be familiar with that in a chemical sense. It's the same sort of thing we say when we say like that someone has potential. There's strength there. But is this gas sturdy? Well, no, we're not talking about its structure. Is it influential? I don't care how popular methane is on Instagram. Like, it probably influences things, but we want something a bit more on the nose. Commanding? No, I don't think methane is giving any orders. It seems that A is our best way to go. While composting can sometimes lead to accidental pollution through the release of methane gas, cities such as San Francisco and Seattle have instituted mandatory composting laws requiring individuals and businesses to separate bins for compost waste. So we're being asked for number 10, which provides the most effective transition from the previous paragraph. All right, so what were we talking about in the previous paragraph? We were talking about how food waste gets sent to the landfills. And in this paragraph, we were talking about, well, let's just read the whole paragraph. Have instituted mandatory composting laws requiring individuals and businesses to use separate bins for compostable waste. This strict approach may not work everywhere. However, given the clear benefits of composting and the environmental costs of not composting, all municipalities should encourage their residents either to create their own compost piles for use in their backyard gardens, or to dispose of compostable materials in bins for collection. Okay, so we're talking about like the sort of legal the legal steps that need to be taken here on a societal level. So one is the tragedy of throwing things in the landfills. The other one is moving forward with city-wide legislation. Which choice provides the most effective transition? I don't think that the accidental negative effects of composting actually really connects all that well. I want to double check that. Yeah, that doesn't really connect with the previous paragraph. Might be interesting information, just not very on point. B, though government regulations vary. Well, no, while we're talking about the government here, we're not transitioning it from the previous paragraph very well. C, armed with these facts. Okay, we did get a lot of facts about the landfills in the previous paragraph, so I'd like C best. Mindful of this setback. Yeah, we weren't just given one setback, right? We were given a few. So let's look for the one that gives us plural, armed with these facts. That's what I like for number 10. And as we get down here, we're saying like all municipalities should encourage their residents to either to create their own compost piles for use in backyard gardens or to dispose of compostable materials in bins for collection. Well, here's something you may or may not know. You've probably heard of like either or categories or either or categories, depending on how you pronounce it. It's always either or, neither nor, both and. And so really only or matches with the either we already have. We would never say either nor, but to dispose of compostable material, no, either but doesn't make any sense. That one is no change. That's perfect as is. Okay, hopefully that was pretty straightforward. Just to show you how these ideas continue, let's try and make a little bit of headway into this next passage as well. And then I'll give you a short break before we break into the math section with Mr. Brett, who will be coming in later. So this one is called A Lion's Share of the Luck. And again, if you have any questions about the grammar that's coming up, just like chime in on the chat at any point here. So again, this is not like a blurb on reading comp. We're not getting a whole lot of info here. Just kind of a title to set the stage. It's the beginning of February, and as they do every year, thousands of people line H Street, the heart of Chinatown in Washington, D.C. The crowd has gathered to celebrate Lunar New Year. The street is a sea of red. Red is the traditional Chinese color of luck and happiness. Okay, so we're being asked about this right here. Right away, I see this repetition, which is a red flag. No pun intended on the fact that we're actually looking at the color red and its repetition there. Which choice most effectively combines the sentences at the underlined portion? Well, we want to find something that will actually get rid of this repetition. The street is a sea of red, comma, the traditional Chinese color of luck and happiness. Yeah, I like that. That works. Red semicolon, in addition, red is, no, you see like in B and C, we're still repeating the word red more than we need to. Red, comma, the color, semicolon, that is the traditional Chinese. No, we know you're talking about red, the color. What else would you be talking about? Red, the Taylor Swift album, I suppose. But that's not something that the street is going to be a sea of. All right, that one was easy. Buildings are draped with festive, comma, red, comma, banners, comma, and garlands. Okay, so we're not being asked about the words. Those are all the same. It does look like we're being asked punctuation. And I don't think we need these commas here. If you can't find a clear reason to use a comma, like don't use it. we're not listing things. We don't have both festive and red and banners. We have festive red banners. They're just draped with festive red banners and garlands. Yeah, we don't need any of these hyphens. We don't need any of these commas here. Lampposts are strung with crimson paper lanterns, which bob in the crisp winter breeze. The eager spectators await the highlight of the New Year parade, the lion dance. Experts agree that the lion dance originated in the Han Dynasty from about 206 BCE to 220 CE. However, there is little agreement about the dance's original purpose. Some evidence suggests that the earliest version of the dance was an attempt to ward off an evil spirit, semicolon. Lions are obviously very fierce. Which choice most effectively completes the explanation of a possible origin of the lion dance? Right, so we want something that gives us a possible origin. This is more just a lion fact, and while that may explain the origin, I don't know if it actually goes into further detail. It just tells us like, hey, lions are scary, by the way. So I don't think A works. B, the evil spirit was called Nyan. Okay, well that has something to do with it. C, villagers dressed in lion costumes to scare the spirit away. All right, that gives us more information than anything else. D, the precise location of the village remains lost to history. No, that's just kind of an explanation of what we don't know, right? C is our best answer. Another theory is that an emperor, upon waking from a dream about a lion, hired an artist to choreograph the dance. The current function of the dance is celebration. You see this repetition here? The dance, the dance. That's another red flag. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's just look at what we're actually being tested on. Which choice most effectively concludes the paragraph? Okay, so we're being given possible origin stories for this tradition. A, no change. I mean, I don't really like it, but I'll just flag it for now. B, it turns out that the origins of the lion dance are irrelevant. No, because if it's irrelevant, then why would we be talking about it? Whatever its origins, today the lion dance is a joyous spectacle, a celebration of the promise of the new year. Okay, so you see how this links to the ideas that came before, and it sets us up for what's coming. The shortest answer isn't always the best one. Things are different these days, of course. Okay, like it just doesn't give us any information that concludes this paragraph. Those are the marks of an effective conclusion. It wraps up one idea while setting the stage for a new one. The lion dance requires and we'll just work through these last two questions here. The lion dance requires the strength, grace, and coordination of two dancers, both of whom are almost completely hidden by the elaborate bamboo and papier-mâché lion costume that they maneuver. Of two dancers, both of whom are hidden, and we're being asked here whether we should say both of whom, both of them, of which both. I think we can cross out of which both. That sounds really awkward. So we're talking about the dancers. And since we're in the same sentence, we don't want to start anything with both of them or both, because that would be like starting a new sentence. Both are almost completely hidden. Both of them are almost completely hidden. That's how we would wrap it up in that way. So both of whom effectively references the word dancers within that same sentence. One person operates the lion's head as the other guides the torso and tail. Many of the moves in the dance, such as jumps, rolls, and kicks, are similar to martial arts and acrobatics. The dancer must be synchronized with the music accompanying the dance, drums, cymbals, and gongs that supply the lion's roar, as well as with each other. So we see here we're being tested on question 17. And it looks here like we're being tested on concision, right? How short can we make this? So many of the moves in the dance, such as jumps, rolls, and kicks, are similar to martial arts and acrobatics. So the disciplines of martial arts and acrobatics, like, yeah, we know those are disciplines, are similar to those in martial arts and acrobatics. We could make an argument for that. Yeah, because we are being asked about the moves in particular. So I think D actually gives us the strongest answer, because we're asking, what are the moves similar to? The moves in the dance are similar to moves in martial arts and acrobatics. They're not similar to all of martial arts and acrobatics, just the moves they're in. And they're not similar to the martial artists and the acrobats themselves. See how we're being as precise as we can.
Okay, so thanks for watching, and please remember to contact us at info@embracetutoring.com to set up any personalized private tutoring sessions you would like. Stay tuned for future videos, and best of luck with your studies. We definitely encourage you to visit our Instagram as well as TikTok pages if you have any questions along the way. Take care, guys. Best of luck with your studies.